If I go into Moodle, I should see all of your individual assignments for 3053. Today. I should see all of your individual assignments. I was a little tired last night. After my 8:30 class, I was a little tired, so I opted not to check them. But don't worry. The idea is to get them marked and back to you by the end of next week, so that you at least know where you stand.
You're having a review
So
class.
all
Next week will be the review class.
All of quizzes we will get back next week? You're still taking that one from in class?
I can't guarantee you. Of course we're taking one, but the online one. But I put that
No, that one that we did
first one
one
is,
in class. We go on
The pop quiz
the pop
kind of
quiz.
one. The managing one.
It's the other class. It's not this. I deliberately left that in my folder, left it out and said, oh, I need to give this back. Okay. Right, so I'll see whatever's in the portal and try to.
So that it's gonna be an average thing, or you're gonna use the best?
No, remember how the course is broken, so we use how the course is broken down, right?
No, I mean like out of all grades, you're gonna use the best ones, or you're just gonna use?
Remember that remember that your
That's how much she did that.
midterm was 10%. Remember that one? I think I finished doing that one, but you want?
I think that's it.
Oh no, I'm not finished with it. I downloaded that morning. I have to go through anyway. So remember that's 10%. Individual assignment is actually worth more. Check it out. I believe it's 15. Or is it 20?
The individual?
Right? And then your quizzes and your, if you show up for tutorials, will come to the other 10. Your quizzes and homework, if we had homework, that will come to the other 10. So yes, Ms. Brown, will tell me if you have it.
It's a
Ms.
participation.
Brown Joseph, will tell me. Right. Huh?
We all go.
You what?
We all go.
You all go? Everybody goes?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, good. Wonderful. And it's a different voice and she...
Yes.
Yes, okay, wonderful. So I should ask her for those grades too?
No.
She's talented. She's very
All
talented.
right, okay, good. That's good. That's very good feedback. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start a forum discussion on the, if you go into the Moodle, you'll see course wrap-up. And start a forum discussion. I'll tell you how I felt about the class. I'm going to ask Mrs. Brown Joseph to put in what she felt, and I want you to tell us what you felt was good about the class, what you felt was bad, what you think we could do differently. Give us that feedback. And my experience is that I come to class and everybody say yes, 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 and then they don't do it.
I forget to do hopefully.
Yes. Right? So please. Okay, so like I said, for those that just came in, this is our last topic, cross-border corporate finance, right? Now, cross-border corporate finance is essentially your international financial management. So you have covered all of the areas that are critically important to the multinational firm, right? And now in this one, this last one tells you about the financial management aspect. It tells you about, you already learned how multinationals raise funds through the international bond market, through the international equity market, how they also raise funds using the international money market. So we did all of that. This one speaks to the sovereign risk. It speaks to things like the rules and regulations from government, and then it also speaks to your capital budgeting, that you would have done in financial management. All right, those who did. Not everybody had to do 2, financial management 2, but everybody had to do 1, right? Okay. So financial management 2 is a little bit more involved. And so this, the part of capital budgeting that we take for this is a bit more advanced, and it's more what you would have seen in financial, for those who did financial management 2. Financial management 1 doesn't have a lot of it, so it may be, I didn't go into it in depth in here, but it may be a little bit more challenging for those who did do financial management 2. All right? The concepts are the same. You are just looking at it from a broader perspective, where you're introducing the foreign exchange risk and the fact that you can now get financing from not just domestic sources, but the external sources. So we know that from our first class, that multinational corporations, the companies will expand to other countries for what reasons?
To lower cost.
To lower operational costs. What else? For growth. What else? Anything else?
Access to raw materials.
Access to raw materials, yes. That's helping them to lower their operational costs. Growth.
Increased market.
Increased markets, yes. So access to new markets. That's growth is access to new markets, yes. All right. And so we've had a few examples. We had the Toyota example. Remember that one? Yeah? Maybe. All right. So companies expand. We already know this. And when they expand, they're investing. They're not just investing in their business, but they're also investing in another country. And so we hear the term foreign direct investment. We hear it around here a lot if you listen to the radio. All right, foreign direct investment. And so governments often try to attract companies to invest in their countries. And so they bring to countries expertise that we may not have and a whole lot of other things, right? So foreign direct investment and establishment of multinational corporations, it involves, for example, Honda would have invested in a plant in Ohio. Toyota, as you know, have plants in, anybody remembers? Kentucky, where else? I remember that little case study of Toyota? Huh? No? Y'all remember?
I don't remember where.
And I thought it was so exciting, just me, right? So, when we were doing foreign exchange rates, no? Somebody remember that?
The case study.
Okay, right. So Honda also did it, all right? Foreign direct investment or expansion can be done with mergers and acquisitions. So you merge with another company overseas, or you acquire a company overseas, right?
Would it greenfield ventures be included in that?
Yes, some degree, yes. Now, companies expanding overseas, all right, becoming a multinational corporation gives the company a measure of control, all right? So they're expanding from a domestic space to a foreign space. Now, foreign direct investments by multinational corporations also, like I said previously, assist countries as well, all right? So it links countries, it links the economies of countries, and it also contributes to what we now have as the global economy. It's no longer emerging, really, we have the global economy. And so we see that everything that Trump is doing in the US is affecting the rest of the world. All right? Because you have American companies that operate in other countries, they have factories, they have factories, they have distribution plants, they may own, they may now own companies that create the raw materials so what they produce, and we'll talk about that again, right, later on. And so companies, when they invest overseas or they expand overseas, done in the form of foreign direct investment, it also contributes to the development of the country that they expand to. And so you have several examples there: Sony, Toyota, Royal Dutch Shell, IBM, Coca-Cola, General Motors, McDonald's, Daimler Chrysler, Bayer. All of those companies have investments in foreign countries. All right. And so as they expand, they also take with them the expertise, both managerial and otherwise. They take with them technology, all right? And so it helps them because they are looking for increased markets, increased profits, but it also helps the countries, the other countries to develop, like ours, for instance, okay? So we would have had, we still have the places like Dixie closed, right? Everybody familiar with Dixie?
It's a gambling place, right?
No, not Dickies.
Oh,
Dixie
sorry.
is a company, like a betting company. A betting Dixie is like a betting company, right? So we still have
It's not the same thing?
Intertops. Yes, Intertops has been around for many, many, many years. And then you have another one in Canada Place, I'm not sure the name of that one. You have a few of them, right? Call centers. And they would have brought with them their own technology. They would have brought with them expertise that they would have shared with us, all right? So the persons who work in these companies, they have to follow specific customer service guidelines in how they deal with customers, right? So they bring both the tangible and the intangible resources to the countries, all right? Now, this is just a little history. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. So you had the US, for example, between 1997 and 2001, they invested $139 billion overseas. The UK did the same thing. Canada would have done the same thing, the other European countries. And so it's billions of dollars that they invest overseas. And that is why foreign direct investment is so attractive to our small countries, all right? Problem is, right now, companies have so advanced and developed their capital budgeting that they have recognized that, this is not in the notes by the way, they have recognized that they may be able to get cheaper financing by taking the loans from us here in the islands to develop their businesses, right? And so they take advantage of that, and instead of bringing money in, they're using my funds, your funds, all of us funds that we deposit in the bank and leave there and don't invest. They're using those funds in the form of loans to develop their businesses. All right? So, for those of you in the other class, we spoke about Sandals and Royalton and loans. Remember, we use those as examples. Those things are real, right? You have the hotel chains coming in and they take the financing from us, okay? So the monies that are coming in, the FDI flows are not as much as they used to be in the past. They do bring some in because they're gonna need to put down deposits for the loans, but they're utilizing some of our funds as well. All right? So for probably, I wouldn't say even the last 20 years, prior to that, you had a lot of FDI flows coming into the region. All right? But it's not as much as before. Now, the US, not this one, the US received the largest amount of FDI inflows among all countries, $202 billion. What are those? Those inflows are made up of other companies in other countries investing in the US. All right, Japanese put their plants in the US. Okay, you have UK companies also. The United Kingdom, that's the next most popular destination for FDI flows, Germany, China. Okay? Now, Canada also has FDI flows, so US, Germany, China, the UK, Canada, some European countries, they account for 60% of the total FDI inflows. So we are getting we're only getting a little bit of FDI inflows in our part of the region. Okay? Now, when we talk about FDIs, foreign direct investment, and you talk about economics and finance, you generally, there's a theory for everything, right? FDI does not have a specific theory that you can say, okay, this is what the research has developed, and this is the theory for FDIs, okay? There are several persons who would have done research and put out theories about foreign direct investment, all right? So you have Kindleberger, that's one of the popular ones, and Heimer. Those are two of the theorists. What they look at is that FDIs are come about because of market imperfections, all right? When we talk about market imperfections, what do we mean? There are differences in what? Let me say market imperfections. Yes, regulation. Yes, what else?
Competition.
Think about the factors of production. Yeah, when you do economics, they tell you what are the factors of production. Land, labor, capital. Now, these days they say entrepreneurship. Back in my day, not such a thing.
Okay.
Land, labor, capital.
That's it?
That's it. Right? So there are imperfections in the labor market. What is that? It means that the price of labor is different across the world. All right? The price of products is different across the world. Then you have the capital markets. There are imperfections in the capital market as well. And the capital market has become huge over the years. And so you have persons investing in the US, persons investing in Europe, in the UK, in the stock markets in those countries. Then we have the emerging markets, right? So our little Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange, all right? Just one company has to come in. One of these huge multinationals needs to have to come in and buy up all the shares, and would pay top dollar for the shares and push up the value of our shares in the region. all right? And so, like I said, just one company, maybe two, and you would see the difference in how that market operates. Problem is, because our economies are so open, because we are vulnerable to disasters and so on, the company profits can get a hit. And so you would not gonna see those companies coming in and buying up our shares like that just yet. All right? But the emerging markets of India, China, Mexico, Brazil, they are getting some of the flows. And that is why you had that Mexican crisis and it was such a problem.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on. So, what are the important elements that would go into a firm deciding to invest overseas, right? So they have to think about trade barriers. What are trade barriers? Anybody listen to the news this morning, the international news this morning?
Tariffs, you mean?
Oh, I'm going to
No, Donald Trump is going to release another set of tariffs. All right? That those become trade barriers. So tariffs are trade barriers, right? So the consideration to invest overseas, tariffs are become an issue. All right? Because a tariff is a trade barrier. In perfect labor market, we spoke about that, where the price of labor is different all over the world. All right? So some countries are more attractive because the price of labor is so low that compensates for the cost of shipping and so on. All right? Intangible assets, well, what are those? Well, intangible assets, things like
Patents?
patents, yes. Anything else? Copyrights, yes. All right, so those assets, that leases, that then vertical integration. Anybody knows what vertical integration is? What my strategic management people? Huh?
ESP.
What's vertical integration? Yes, Richard. All right, so a company will expand by purchasing the other companies that produce the elements needed for its the inputs. All right. Product life cycle is a consideration, and shareholder diversification services. So those are some of the main factors that are critical to a firm's decision to invest overseas. What is not here, but is very important, is the tax regime. Okay? The tax regime in a country, that's going to be quite important. Excuse me one moment.
I'm talking
Sorry about that. Okay, so tax regimes become important, and regulations, of course. Okay. What we found, if you remember, we go back to chapter 1, the reduction in regulations, assisted globalization, but we recognize that regulation is critical, all right? And the trade barriers also very critical in decisions. So now that there are tariffs on, the US is putting tariffs on certain things, multinational corporations that invest in the US now need to think about how they are going to deal with that issue. You may even find that companies may decide to leave the US, all right, and move their full operations to another country, because if their inputs are going to be taxed, then it may be worth their while to move. So the issue of trade barriers and what Trump is doing right now, those policies, they have to be very careful with the balancing, how they balance those things, right? But anyway, we're not trying to help the US set their policies, so we move on. All right. Now, this just details each of those factors. All right. So the imperfect markets for both goods, services, labor, they're usually created by government regulations. All right. So the tariffs, quotas, and restrictions on exports and imports of goods and services. We see it here where you would have had restrictions on eggs, for example. So you're trying to protect the local industry. All right, but then after egg prices went up, Prime Minister said what? All right, they carried them up a little too high. They're gouging the customers, and so I'm going to allow the import of eggs. And what happened? The eggs came in, and the price of the imported eggs was cheaper than the local eggs. So imperfect markets are usually created by acts of government. All right, so the different regulations and the tariffs and so on. And tariffs in particular and quotas, it reduces the free flow of goods and services across national boundaries. The reason tariffs are put in place is to help domestic governments to raise revenues, all right?
And to help their businesses, local businesses.
To help their business as well. So Donald Trump will tell you that he is trying to bring back, production to the U.S. So you shouldn't be making your products outside and then bringing them in. So he's trying to bring back full manufacturing to the U.S. So in effect, he's actually trying to right-size the economy and to fix that trade imbalance that they have. However, they need to look at how is that going to affect the U.S. really, all right? Because the inflation will be created, all right? Because it's going to be more costly to produce in the U.S. Trade barriers can develop naturally because of cost. All right, so mostly transportation cost. So if the cost of shipping increases, then that's a natural trade barrier. All right. We import cement and we import it in bulk, right? And the cost to transport that affects your cost of construction, and it has a ripple effect down the line, okay? So transportation cost is major, and it can develop into a trade barrier. Then of course, you have the cost of labor, okay? We know that companies like Nike, there was a time that there's a call for a boycott of Nike products because their products were being made in sweatshops, all right, where the conditions were really, really bad. Recently, people have been talking about Shein,
yes,
all right, and I'm sure lots of you order from Shein. I don't know. I'm not going to ask you to put up your hand. But
Make purchases.
when you think about the low cost of these items that you're purchasing, you have to ask yourself, how are they able to produce at the low cost? Is it that they're using substandard material, all right?
True.
Or, so you have to look at the cost, you must look at the cost, all right? So, there are these pictures that show the factories in China where the products are being made, all right? Shein, Alibaba, and so on. So, labor is usually underpriced in certain countries to reduce costs for companies, all right? And usually, because of visa restrictions and so on, these people naturally won't be able to move. So they lower the cost of labor deliberately so that they can attract, these countries can attract foreign direct investments. And you note here that the labor market is that part of the production that is mostly perfect, right? So where are some of the places that companies are producing, especially clothes and shoes?
China.
Apart from China, we know China. Where else?
Thailand.
Huh? Thailand,
Vietnam.
Vietnam, yes.
Mexico.
Even Korea, all right, because the labor is that much.
Why not Africa?
Hmm?
Why not Africa? African countries. I don't know, maybe climate.
That's a good question. All right, so the imperfection of the labor market is like the biggest attraction to multinational corporations to move their production. All right. So, and these are just some examples. So you have Coca-Cola. They have plants all over the world, and they have infiltrated these markets to expand their business, obviously. All right. But they also want to protect the formula for Coca-Cola, all right? Because Coca-Cola, Coke should taste the same wherever you go. It actually doesn't, but
Okay, I didn't know that.
you know, they want it to taste the same wherever you go. Multinationals may undertake investments overseas, even though the local firms have advantages, all right? Now, the way multinational corporations do that, where the local firm has advantages, will have the advantage is that they tend to merge or create a partnership with those local firms. Right? The multinational firms can have comparative advantage, meaning it is cheaper for them to produce because of certain issues. So they may have the intangible assets like the patents and so on. They may have the expertise that's not available in country. All right, so that's also intangible. So your managerial expertise, all right, then you have the technology, money, and you have the marketing, all right? So, and then many of them already have that need. And so a local company would want to, or be happy to be taken over by a brand name company because the owners think that they will get more profits if they have the brand of a company coming in. All right? Multinational companies or corporations, they will pursue vertical integration, so they acquire big companies along the supply chain. All right? It can cause problems between the upstream and the downstream firms. So the companies that are bringing in the inputs and those that are distributing. All right? And so vertical integration is one way to solve that. Now, with vertical integration, and when you're merging firms or you're acquiring firms, and the company has to look at what is it going to cost me to acquire the firm versus the benefits. All right, so the companies are going to look at the synergies that can be had, and they price those synergies. All right, versus the cost of the investment. So we're getting a little bit into capital budgeting here, where you're looking at your costs versus your expected cash flows. All right? Is your financial management coming into play. Now, it's sometimes profitable to locate your manufacturing or processing facilities close to the natural resources to save on the transportation cost, depending on which is more costly, the underground transportation cost or the overseas or through the air transportation cost. Usually it's over the sea because you're talking about weighty products, and so it's usually over the sea. And so your vertical integration happens because companies are trying to really trying to cut their costs and to be able to control their inputs. Because if you are not able to, if you are not in control of your inputs, your costs could escalate very quickly. All right, and we know that every company is in business to make profits. All right. And we're still talking about the theory of FDI. All right, so we first started talking about why companies expand. Now we're talking about when do they expand. All right, so that also goes into the theory of FDI. So Raymond Vernon says that firms will undertake FDI at a particular stage in the life cycle of the products that they initially introduce, right? So he has what you call a product life cycle theory, and when they first introduce those products, they will keep the production facilities at home, close to their customers. But then they are going to, when that market becomes saturated, they are going to want to expand. All right, so in the early stages of the product life cycle, you're going to have demand for the new product, and so the price doesn't matter. All right, so the firm can charge a higher price. However, once that market becomes saturated, they're going to have to adjust the price. And so they're going to want to expand to a different market, to new markets, all right? And so as that product becomes more standardized and mature, then they have to cut the costs, all right? And that's when they look to move overseas and also look to move into new markets. So they'll move overseas to help to cut their costs, or they will move overseas to attract new customers. All right, so cost is like the major consideration, because once you keep your costs down, then you can make a profit. All right? So foreign direct investment is thought to be a defensive move to maintain the firm's competitive position against its domestic and foreign rivals. In strategic management, how many of you did strategic management? Nobody? You did it in the summer? Or you don't have to take it?
We did
Business strategy
business,
and policy?
yeah, BSP, yeah, that's the same thing.
You have to take that. Just about everybody has to take business strategy and
I
policy.
did that, yes.
Except maybe banking and finance. Right? So, how do businesses become more competitive? What are the things that businesses do to become more competitive? This is one of them. All right? So they're trying to cut their costs. In cutting their costs, they may move some of their production overseas. All right? What does that look like? That slide is out of place. Okay, I'll come back to it if I have to. Yeah, that slide is definitely out of place. Okay. So, foreign direct investment can take place either through greenfield investments. Zoe mentioned greenfield investments just now. What's greenfield investment, Zoe?
Research and like physical manufacturing plants.
Okay. All right, so FDIs can take place either through greenfield investments, in which new production facilities are built in a foreign country, or through cross-border mergers and acquisitions. And I mentioned that earlier. So they can set up their physical production facilities, or they can merge with a firm overseas that has these facilities, or acquire or overtake. So take over a firm that has these facilities. What you have found in the last 20 years or so is that you have more and more FDIs using the cross-border mergers and acquisitions. All right, so it's cross-border mergers and acquisition account for more than 50% of FDI flows in dollar value. All right, so for the same reasons that they expand overseas, companies will participate in cross-border merger and acquisition to strengthen their competitive position, and so that they are able to make more money. The value of cross-border mergers and acquisitions is speed and access to proprietary assets. So greenfield investments are going to take longer, because you're going to have to, first you need to raise the funds. You have to make sure that you're abiding by the local regulations, legislation regulations, and then it takes time to build. All right? You may have to be importing equipment. Hopefully you're doing greenfield investment in a place where you can source the equipment locally, and that's why you're there. But the merger and acquisition, it's quicker, and you get access to the proprietary assets right away once you have done the legal side of the deal. All right, so it's much quicker. Mergers and acquisitions, generally, you will find that the synergies that you get from the merger and acquisition is going to be more than if you did a greenfield investment and the value of that investment. So when you're doing cross-border mergers and acquisitions, when companies are making that decision to merge, they price the synergies, they price the gain. So they're going to price the expertise that the company they're merging with brings, all right, to the table. They obviously are going to price the equipment, the plant, all right. So they're going to do the valuation of everything, right? And so usually when you put together, they combine the value of the two companies, or the synergistic gains as they're called, it's usually more beneficial, all right? Synergistic gains may or may not arise from cross-border acquisitions, but for the most part, the company acquiring or merging with is going to look at synergistic gains. If they're prudent with their capital budgeting, they're going to look for those gains, all right? So the gains will occur when the acquirer chooses to take advantage of the market imperfections that we spoke about earlier, all right? So usually it's because they see an advantage there that they are going to merge or acquire, all right? The mathematical side of that, we're not going to get into too much, but we will have a look at it. Now, the intangible assets, the imperfections in the market for intangible assets, that is a huge motivator for companies doing cross-border acquisitions, all right? Because the internationalization theory suggests that a firm that has intangible assets and have a public good property such as technical and managerial know-how may acquire a foreign firm as a platform for using its special assets on a larger scale, and at the same time avoid any misappropriation that could occur while they are doing the transaction in a foreign market, all right? Because you always have that risk of the misappropriation, okay? In terms of other motivation, they may want to acquire and internalize the target's firm's intangible assets as well. So that's not supposed to be there. All right, so the firm acquiring or merging, they not only look, they're looking at what that other firm has as well. So yes, they want to take advantage of marketing imperfections, but they also want, they also have an eye on the target firm's intangible assets. Not just the tangible, the property, plant, the equipment, but the intangible as well. All right? And this is considered to be backward internalization, where the acquirer seeks to create wealth by appropriating the rent generated from the economies of scale that they get from using the target's intangible assets on a global basis. Now, the term renting there, we know what that means. It's not the actual, it's not rent that you pay, it's economic rent. Any economists in here? Ah, yes, I found her.
Who is that?
She's an economic major, or maybe she's not all the way up there yet, so
Okay.
she's not quite as high up. So economies of scale are going to produce savings, all right? Gonna produce savings. And the savings are from the use of intangible assets. Okay, so the term, you can look it up, the term economic rent. Okay? Anyways, I'm not gonna get into that.
Okay.
Any questions so far? See how my time is going. All right, so it's a good time for a break. We're an hour in, and I'm tired talking.
Okay. Mr. Legs.
Have to rest the throat. All right, so we can take 5 and then we'll talk about we're gonna get more into the risk that arises, the political risk, the sovereign risk, and then the capital budgeting side of things. All right?
Okay.